Previously, on Scars of Love, Felina, Nate said, his tone serious, "Are you safe? That stunt you pulled back there could have gone very wrong. Please, don't do that again." Felina chuckled softly, unbothered by his concern. "Don't worry, doctor. My accident, my opportunity," she said cryptically. Nate arrived at Felina's home promptly, a bouquet of flowers in hand. He stepped into her living room and was immediately struck by its simplicity and elegance. The warm tones of the furniture, the tasteful decorations, and the gentle scent of vanilla candles spoke volumes about her character, calm, deliberate, and refined. "This is lovely," Nate said, his voice sincere as he handed her the flowers. "Your living room has such a warm, personal touch." Felina smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Thank you, Natty. It's not much, but it's home." Before Nate could say more, Felina leaned in and planted a soft kiss on his cheek. "Welcome," she whispered, her voice tender. Nate followed her to the dining room, where the table was set with immaculate care. The aroma of freshly cooked jollof and fried rice filled the air, mingling with the rich scent of roasted turkey. As they sat down, Felina poured the sparkling non-alcoholic wine into their glasses. "This smells heavenly," Nate said, taking his first bite. His eyes lit up, and he raised his fork in admiration. "Felina, this is incredible. Where did you learn to cook like this?" Felina laughed softly. "Let's just say you're not the only one who's skilled with their hands." They shared a warm laugh, and Nate continued to shower her with compliments throughout the meal. After the plates were cleared and the wine glasses emptied, Nate leaned back in his chair, a curious look in his eyes. "So, Felina," he began, his tone light but probing. "I have to admit, this dinner has been perfect. But I know there's more to it. Why the special invitation? And most importantly, what did you mean by, my accident, my opportunity?" Felina's playful smile faded, replaced by a serious expression. She folded her hands on the table and took a deep breath before speaking. "The Haman of my life was Sinak," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "And the Babylonians were everyone who encouraged me to marry him, even when it was clear he was wrong for me." Nate leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers as she recounted her story. She described the accident, the scar it left on her face, and how that very scar had exposed Sinak's shallow love and freed her from the suffocating golden cage he had built around her. "I thought the scar was a curse at first," Felina admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But over time, I realized it was a blessing in disguise. It has become my weapon, Nate. It scares away anyone who can't see beyond the surface. Anyone who isn't genuine. And I vowed to only remove it for someone who loves me completely, scar and all." Her eyes softened as she gazed at him. "Natty," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I'm free now. Free to love. Free to live. And I've discovered that with you." Felina reached across the table and took Nate's hand, her grip firm yet trembling. "Natty," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Will you marry me? And if you will, please help me take away this mark of reproach. I'm ready for the operation, ready for myself, for you, and for true love." As the last words left her lips, tears spilled from her eyes. She tried to hold them back, but the weight of her emotions was too much to bear. Nate moved swiftly to her side, his heart aching at the sight of her tears. He gently lifted her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Felina," he said, his voice steady but filled with warmth, "your scar is not a mark of reproach. It's a mark of strength, of resilience, of triumph. And while I have the skill to remove it, I don't want you to think for a second that it defines you, or that it diminishes your beauty." He paused, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I will marry you, Felina. Not because of your scar, and not despite it, but because I love every part of you, your strength, your courage, your beauty, your heart." Felina's tears flowed freely now, but they were tears of relief and joy. Nate pulled her into a tender embrace, whispering softly, "We'll do the operation, but only when you're ready, and only for yourself. Not for me, not for anyone else." In that moment, Felina felt a peace she hadn't known in years. For the first time, she was truly seen, truly valued, and truly loved. As the date for Felina's operation approached, Nate found himself wrestling with an uncharacteristic sense of apprehension. For a man who had performed countless reconstructive surgeries with precision and confidence, the sudden unease gnawed at him. He sat alone in his study one evening, flipping through Felina's medical reports and sketches of the procedure. His mind was clouded with questions he couldn't answer. "Why am I feeling this way?" he muttered aloud, tapping his pen nervously against the desk. "It's a routine procedure. 10 minutes, maybe less. So why does it feel like I'm preparing for the most critical surgery of my life?" The questions swirled relentlessly. Is it because she's my personal person? Is it because I love her? Is it because of the people who will be watching? Or is it because this isn't just about her face, it's about her future, her confidence, her everything? Nate sighed deeply, burying his face in his hands. He had never doubted his skills before, but this wasn't just any patient. This was Felina, the woman who had awakened feelings in him he hadn't known existed. Meanwhile, Felina was quietly preparing for the day that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She had sent word to her parents, asking them to come and stand by her during this pivotal moment. Her mother and father arrived the day before the operation, their faces a mixture of concern and excitement. "You're so brave, my daughter," her mother said, holding her hands tightly. "This is not just about removing a scar. It's about stepping into your new life with confidence. And we'll be here every step of the way." Her father, ever the stoic one, nodded but couldn't hold back his emotions. "We're proud of you, Felina," he said softly. "You've grown into a strong, wise woman. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that we love you just as you are." Felina's heart swelled with gratitude and love. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly supported, not just by Nate, but by her family as well. That night, Nate barely slept. He tossed and turned, haunted by his own questions. He kept picturing Felina's face, her smile, her scar, and the vulnerability she had shown him. Finally, as dawn approached, he sat up in bed and whispered to himself, "This isn't just about me. This is about her. I need to set my emotions aside and do what I do best. For her." The hospital buzzed with quiet anticipation as the day began. Felina, dressed in a simple hospital gown, sat in the waiting room with her parents. Her hands were clasped tightly together, but her face was calm. When Nate entered, dressed in his surgical attire, their eyes met. He could see the trust and hope in her gaze, and it steadied him. "Are you ready, Felina?" he asked, his voice gentle. She smiled faintly and nodded. "Ready as I'll ever be, Natty." As Felina was prepped for surgery, Nate took a moment to compose himself in the hallway. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, centering himself. "This isn't about me," he reminded himself. "This is about her. I can do this." When the procedure began, Nate's hands moved with the precision and confidence of a master craftsman. Despite the emotional weight of the moment, his training and skill took over. When the operation was complete, Nate removed his gloves and exhaled deeply. He looked at Felina, who was still under anesthesia, and felt a sense of profound relief and accomplishment. "She's going to be okay," he whispered to himself. "She's going to be better than okay." As Felina's parents entered the recovery room, Nate approached them with a reassuring smile. "It's done," he said simply. "And it went perfectly." Felina's mother burst into tears, hugging Nate tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." When Felina finally woke up, the first thing she saw was Nate's face, his eyes filled with warmth and pride. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. Felina reached up to touch her face, her fingers trembling slightly. Though the bandages still covered her cheek, she could feel the absence of the scar. "I feel free," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Nate leaned closer, his voice tender. "You were always free, Felina. The scar never defined you. You defined yourself." As her parents stood by her bedside, beaming with pride, Felina knew that this wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of a beautiful new story. And at the center of it all was Nate, the man who had not only seen her true beauty but had also helped her see it for herself. Felina's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Within days, her face began to show the radiant glow of healing, and by the time she was discharged, her transformation was complete. Her skin was flawless, her features more stunning than ever, and her confidence seemed to light up every room she entered. As she stepped into the hospital corridors for the first time post-surgery, staff and patients alike were captivated. Doctors, nurses, and even student practitioners lined up to congratulate her, some asking for pictures with her as if she were a celebrity. "Felina, you're glowing like an angel," one nurse exclaimed. "You're proof that miracles happen," said another. Even her parents, who had always known her beauty, were overwhelmed with joy. Her father's voice trembled as he said, "My daughter, you've always been beautiful to us, but now the world will see what we've always known." When Nate drove Felina home, he couldn't hide his pride. As they arrived at her home, he walked her to the door, both of them smiling and content. In the following weeks, the news of Felina's transformation spread far and wide. Pictures of her before and after the operation began circulating, and the hospital suddenly became the epicenter for those seeking plastic surgery of all kinds. Patients poured in, demanding procedures like facial reconstructions, skin grafts, rhinoplasty, liposuction, breast reconstructions and hand and finger reconstructions. Every day, the hospital was flooded with people hoping for a second chance at life, and Nate became the name on everyone's lips. The overwhelming success of Felina's surgery brought Nate into the spotlight. Media houses covered the story extensively, highlighting his expertise and his ability to transform lives. Articles, interviews, and documentaries praised his skill and compassion. Within months, Nate received national awards recognizing his contributions to medical science in Nigeria, international accolades from medical associations, including the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, lucrative offers from hospitals and private clinics abroad to head their plastic surgery departments, and government contracts for reconstructive surgeries for burn and trauma victims. Despite the accolades, Nate remained humble, always crediting his team and emphasizing the human side of his work. Though the attention on Nate was immense, Felina also became a symbol of hope and resilience. She began to advocate for self-acceptance and the importance of inner beauty while also encouraging people to seek help if it could enhance their confidence and quality of life. She appeared alongside Nate at several events, where they were celebrated as a team, a doctor and his patient, whose journey had inspired countless others. The hospital, once a modest establishment, transformed into a leading center for plastic and reconstructive surgery in Nigeria. It became a hub for medical tourism, attracting patients from all over Africa and beyond. And at the heart of it all were Nate and Felina, partners in life and in purpose, proving that beauty isn't just about appearances, it's about healing, hope, and the courage to embrace new beginnings. Sinak, now a shadow of his former self, arrived at the hospital unannounced. Dressed in a designer suit that hung loosely on him, his once proud demeanor seemed forced. He walked into the hospital lobby, his eyes scanning for a glimpse of Felina. In his delusion, Sinak believed that Felina, upon hearing of his so-called ordeal, would run back to his arms. He had rehearsed his speech countless times, imagining her melting into his embrace as he poured out fabricated tales of hardship and regret. To one of his equally vain friends, Sinak had boasted, "I know how to rekindle old fire. Women can't resist a man who knows how to apologize dramatically. Felina will be mine again." After inquiring at the reception, he was directed to a lounge where staff often took breaks. As he entered, he saw Felina, radiant and stunning as ever, sitting at a table with Nate. They were laughing over something, their connection evident even to a blind man. Sinak froze, momentarily struck by Felina's beauty. The scar that had once repelled him was now completely gone, replaced by a face that seemed almost otherworldly in its perfection. Jealousy and regret gnawed at his insides. "Felina," he called out, his voice shaky but attempting confidence. Felina turned, her laughter fading as she recognized the voice. Her expression shifted from surprise to composed indifference. "Sinak," she said, her tone flat and unreadable. Nate glanced at Sinak, quickly piecing together who he was. He placed a protective hand on Felina's arm but remained silent, letting her take control of the situation. Sinak approached the table, his steps deliberate, as if rehearsing his performance. He looked directly at Felina, ignoring Nate completely. "I heard about everything," Sinak began. "About the accident, the surgery. Felina, I made a mistake. I let my foolish pride and vanity cloud my judgment. But seeing you now, I realize I never stopped loving you." Felina raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "And what do you expect me to do with this sudden epiphany, Sinak?" Sinak faltered, taken aback by her icy response. "Felina, we had something special. I've been through so much since we parted. Life hasn't been the same without you. I thought, maybe we could start over." Felina stood, her posture graceful but commanding. "Sinak, I don't know what fantasy you've concocted, but let me be clear. What we had was never special, it was suffocating. You didn't love me, you loved what I represented, beauty, status, and a trophy to parade around. When I needed you most, you abandoned me. You called my scar a mark of Cain. Do you think I've forgotten that?" Do you think I'd ever trust someone as shallow and self-absorbed as you again? Sinak's face turned red with embarrassment and anger. But I've changed. Can't you see that? Felina laughed softly, a sound free of bitterness. Sinak, you haven't changed. You're here because you think I'm still the same woman who would bend over backward to please you. But I'm not. I've found love, real love, with someone who sees me for who I am, not for how I look. She turned to Nate, who stood beside her now, his presence a silent show of support. Sinak, let me introduce you to Dr. Nathaniel Coker. He's the man who fixed my face and healed my heart. And unlike you, he doesn't need to rekindle old fires, he's building something new with me. Sinak's bravado crumbled. He looked between Felina and Nate, his jealousy barely concealed. You'll regret this, Felina, he spat, desperation lacing his words. No one will ever love you like I did. Felina smiled, her expression serene. You're right, Sinak. No one will ever love me the way you did, thank God for that. With that, she turned and walked away, Nate following close behind. Sinak stood there, alone and defeated, realizing too late that he had lost the best thing he ever had. As Felina and Nate exited the hospital, Nate looked at her and said, You handled that with incredible grace. Are you okay? Felina nodded, a serene smile on her lips. I'm more than okay, Nate. For the first time, I feel free. And as they walked to the car, hand in hand, Sinak's shadow faded behind them, a distant reminder of a past that no longer had any power over Felina's life. Later that evening, after they had shared another quiet meal together, Nate decided it was time to open up to Felina. His face was serious yet tender as he began to speak. Felina, he started, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. She looked up, sensing the gravity in his tone. I'm listening, Nate. My mission in Nigeria is almost complete, he continued. The research exchange program ends in 4 months, and I'll need to return to the United States to resume my work at the hospital there. Felina's heart skipped a beat at the mention of his departure, but she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Before you say anything, Nate added quickly, I want you to know that my time here hasn't just been about the research. There was another reason I came to Nigeria, one that's deeply personal. You see, before my mother passed away, she made me promise her something. Felina tilted her head, intrigued. What promise? She made me promise that I would marry a Nigerian woman. My mother always said that Nigerian women have a strength and beauty that is unmatched. She wanted me to honor my heritage by building a life with someone who shared it. Nate paused, his gaze locking onto Felina's. At first, I thought it was just a sentimental wish, something I could take my time fulfilling. But then I met you, and I realized that my mother was right. You embody everything she admired, your strength, your intelligence, your resilience, your beauty inside and out. You are the woman I've been waiting for. Felina's eyes glistened with emotion, but she said nothing, letting him finish. Nate took a deep breath. Felina, I don't want to leave Nigeria without you. Will you come with me to America? Will you meet my family and help me fulfill this dream? But more importantly, will you stand beside me, not just as my wife but as my partner, my equal, and the co-founder of Koful Hospital International? Together, we can turn our mourning into dancing, our ashes into beauty, and our heaviness into garments of rejoicing. We've been given a second chance, and I want to build a life with you, one filled with purpose and love. Felina's face broke into a radiant smile as tears streamed down her cheeks. She placed her hands over Nate's, her voice trembling with joy. Yes, Nate, she said. I'll go with you. I'll meet your family, and I'll stand with you, always. I've dreamed of this, of building something meaningful, and with you by my side, I know it's possible. Nate's eyes softened as he gently pulled her into his arms. You've made me the happiest man alive, Felina. Together, we'll create something extraordinary, something that will honor our love and help others find hope and healing. The two of them sat together in peaceful silence, their hearts full of hope and excitement for the future. The journey ahead would not be without challenges, but they knew they could face anything as long as they were together. Felina thought back to all the trials she had endured, the scar, the heartbreak, the doubts. But in that moment, she realized that every challenge had led her to this point, to a love that was true, unconditional, and full of purpose. She whispered softly, almost to herself, indeed, my mourning has turned into dancing. And with Nate by her side, she knew her best days were still to come. In just 5 whirlwind weeks, everything fell into place for Nate and Felina. Their engagement ceremonies were intimate yet grand, filled with laughter, love, and the blessings of family and friends. The traditional wedding followed in spectacular fashion, celebrating their union with the rich colors, music, and customs of their heritage. Felina's stunning beauty, now fully restored, left everyone in awe, but it was the love in her eyes and the confidence in her smile that shone brightest of all. Plans were quickly made for the final church wedding to be held in Nate's home church in Chicago. Felina was excited to meet Nate's family and begin her new life, but she also made it clear she would always cherish her roots, promising to return to Nigeria often to continue the work they had started together. Their workplace organized a glamorous send-forth party, celebrating not just their union but also their remarkable contributions to the hospital. The hospital's director delivered an emotional speech, calling them a beacon of hope and inspiration. Colleagues, friends, and patients all lined up to give them heartfelt gifts, ranging from framed photos of memorable moments to handmade crafts symbolizing their journey. Felina's parents were moved to tears by the outpouring of love, and Nate couldn't help but feel immense pride in the woman standing beside him. Felina, too, felt overwhelmed by the incredible support she had received, reflecting on how far she had come, from heartbreak and scars to love and purpose. On the day of their departure, the airport was packed with well-wishers. It was as if the president of Nigeria himself was leaving the country. There were drummers, dancers, and even a choir that had come to bid the couple farewell. Some people cried, others laughed, and many did both at the same time. Felina's younger siblings clung to her tightly, while neighbors and friends waved Nigerian flags and banners that read, "Farewell, Felina and Nate. We love you." As Nate and Felina walked toward the boarding gate, hand in hand, they turned back to take one last look at the crowd. Felina raised her hand, waving at the people who had supported her through her trials. Nate gave a final nod of gratitude, promising silently that they would return someday to continue their mission. The crowd roared with cheers and applause as the couple disappeared into the terminal, ready to embark on a new chapter of their lives together. Nate and Felina's story reminds us all of the power of resilience, love, and purpose. It shows that even in the face of scars, both visible and invisible, there is always the possibility of healing, joy, and new beginnings. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so others can also experience this incredible journey of love and redemption. Thank you for watching.